All right, so we are a few minutes past midday, so we might kick off, and I'm sure any stragglers can pick up along their way. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name's Dan Peroni, and I'm based out of the 6 Degrees office in sunny Brisbane. We are very pleased this afternoon to be hosting Brad Jeavons to take us through a very timely topic on how to create a winning sales team in uncertain times. As most of you probably know, Brad is the author of the book Agile Sales, which is a roadmap for organizational leaders looking to implement the Agile methodology into sales environments. Brad has also recently launched his podcast series, Enterprise Excellence, where he interviews thought leaders from around the globe. Joining Brad today is James Poulsen. James is the head of sales for Signet and has worked extensively with Brad as they've transformed Signet's national sales team from a traditional catalog and cold call based business into a more insightful and data-driven function with a strong focus on value selling in a space that has become more commoditized over the years. Before we begin though, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and their elders, past, present, and future. Just with regards to a little bit of housekeeping before we do get stuck into things, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available following the session today through our website. We'll also be sending out a follow-up survey in the coming days, and as always, any feedback is greatly appreciated. We will also have some time at the end of the session for some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them via the Q&A option in the Zoom layout in front of you. And as I said, we'll address those with Brad and James towards the end. But without any further ado, I will hand over now to Brad and James for this afternoon.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks, James, for joining us to help out in this one, on this presentation.
No problem.
So everyone, we're presenting today on creating a winnable sales game in uncertain times. And, we've certainly been through that over the last 12 months. It's been tough, and there continues to be a lot of uncertainty moving forward. I think even with the changes in digital technology and all sorts, it's just going to get more and more. So I've written the book Agile Sales, which the difference with the book Agile Sales is that it talks a lot to the systems of sales and the cultural aspect of sales, and also customer alignment. Whereas most sales books and approaches are all on different techniques, this is more on the systems and culture of really getting high performance. And I also, with this presentation, I just want to recognize James Kerr and his book Legacy, which was written on the All Blacks and what they achieved. And it's another great book that applies a lot of learning from sport across to business and how to get high performance, particularly in uncertain times. So we're going to talk about it. I'm going to be applying it back to rugby, and it'll become more clear as we go along. Actually, Agile and Scrum, that's a big part of that, have their foundations in being recognized like a rugby game. So we'll work on that. And James is going to provide practical examples from Signet as we go through. So if I tick on to the next slide, if we talk about the goals of sales and sales leadership and as an organization as a whole, I really understand that typically it's about business growth. We need to hit or exceed our budget. We need to sustain margin, gross margin and profitability. And then also there's goals often of quality outcomes for customers. We want that everything we do provides that great quality outcome and also amazing customer experience. So whenever I deal with organizations, these are typically the top 4 that come through as goals. And then when I research and work with organizations, I typically get these challenges come up. So the number one challenge is competitive buyer's market. So margins are being eroded. We're getting, competed against people more regularly. It's tougher to be able to actually truly deliver greater value. Rising prices and price increases coming through, particularly now, and having to navigate that and help customers through that, and also retain business through that. Team capability and performance. So typically in most sales organizations I see, there would be 1 or 2 high performers, and there'll be, the majority of everyone else. It'll be like a Pareto chart. And it's how do we get that high performance across the board? And then also back office impacts. A lot of sales teams I come across, there's a lot of back office disruption and impacts and quality defects and problems that impact customers and then impact sales. And then also, of course, the uncertainty at the moment. uncertainty in relation to COVID and everything that's gone on, but also technology and innovation that our competitors may be bringing out. There's so many companies now where sales teams are being disrupted, largely because their competition come out with an amazing new product that's highly innovative, and it just takes the market. So there's a lot of challenges there. And today we're going to look to unpack these a bit, and I'm going to propose some systems and cultural approaches that can really help you form a high performance team to navigate these uncertain times, overcome some of these challenges, and really hit those goals. And James, I'll hand over to you now just to introduce Signet briefly.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So Signet's a family-run and owned organisation, and we're about 52 years old this year. So have been very prevalent in the Australian marketplace for a number of years, and really a very trusted organisation. Signet is predominantly a packaging business. We have manufacturing and distribution networks all over Australia. We turn over about 150 mil nationally. We've got DCs in all of our major cities and states across Australia. And I guess a critical focus on us, well, for our customers, is not only to be operationally excellent, but to offer a high level of customer value, whether it's through the selection of products that we distribute. We distribute about 5,500 individual SKUs of product across a very wide diversity of customers. But really setting us up to be a first choice in the packaging market. Signet is really about helping our customers remaining competitive in their own environments. We're not out there to tell businesses how to run, but we hope that through our small area of expertise, we can help them in staying competitive around that packaging space. And that's been a critical focus for us. So I've been with the business for about 15, 16 years. So know it very well and know the customer base very well. And it's a great, exciting business to be a part of. So the Signet business, as I mentioned, is very broad. We've got a database of between 30 and 35,000 active customers, and they range from a small end user, could be a cafe or a pie shop around the corner type thing, all the way through to very large international blue chip organisations like Coles or Woolworths, Aldi, Kmart, big retailers. So the needs of those customers is really quite diverse, and the products that we sell into them is quite diverse as well. But really, we're able to operate out the back of their business from anywhere from goods in through to goods out the door, and that's in your typical packaging items like stretch wrap, cartons, etc., into some more niche products like visual workplace and janitorial, safety, PPE, and our sister company is also a label manufacturer and converter. So it's a very wide selection of products that we can help our customers with a great range at really good prices and very high quality.
So guys, with it today, we'll be going through some of these elements I'm going to talk to and sharing the Signet journey that hopefully will provide you some insights and help you guys to navigate the future to come. So what we'll cover, first of all, we're going to talk about defining the goal, plan, and why. This is about the top line plan for an organization, but also the purpose behind it and getting that motivational piece. We're going to talk about forming the team, your sales team or any team, based on the customer and the plan rather than traditional silos or divisions is the way that we've traditionally formed teams. We're going to talk about helping the team define their field of play, their plan and their goals, and down to the individual. Creating a visual scoreboard and ways to do this and how that can really help. We're going to talk about Scrum and applying this to sales and the concept of sprint towards goals. And we're going to talk about practice and coaching and some different leadership techniques that can really help. So again, I'm talking a lot about sales systems and cultural systems to really lead performance, which I think if you look at any sporting team, it's typically what differentiates the ones who win from the ones that don't. It comes down to that culture and that system they run. And also some of our greatest coaches are renowned for that. So let's go into it. So the first topic is defining the goal, the plan, and why. So any organization that doesn't have a solid plan, which includes, things like a clear vision, reason for going after it, that mission or purpose, challenging goal it needs to achieve to sustain a point of difference for its customers, and really uses macro and micro data to understand what they need to do strategically to move forward, is probably in a place of weakness right now, particularly in uncertain times. And this planning function in uncertain times often needs to be a bit more iterative. You know, as things change, we move and we adjust the plan and then go forward from that. And so the first thing I'd say that's important to be able to navigate uncertain times is having that top line plan that covers some of the key elements that truly brings it to life, but also making it visual and understood by people of the organization and giving them a chance to have a say in it. I think there's an old statement in the art of war, which is, plans, relevant until the first shot's fired, and then it needs to be replanned again. And that's sort of the times we're in. I think the plan is still extremely important, but it needs to be adaptable. Let's look at Signet. James, I'll hand over to you on how you guys have gone about this.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Well, I think it's always interesting to start talking about your goals and your plan and your why, because fundamentally it's such a critical component of the growth of your organization. So like I mentioned earlier, we've got a really broad customer base spreading across a variety of industries, from online retailers through to heavy industrial manufacturers, small businesses. It's really quite diverse, but also really exciting to deal in that market, because you can see what's going up and what's going down, and it's a real test for the Australian economy, I think. But anyway, I think given that the customer base is so broad, we really had to get a strong understanding of who our customer was, what they wanted, what they needed from us, and just align it back with who we were as a business also. So I might jump around a little bit in here, but as an organization, we first started off with our why, and I spoke about this before, and that was helping Australia compete. And that's not necessarily about us coming into organizations and telling them what they should do to be competitive in their own fields, but really about us being an Australian business, supporting other Australian businesses in Australia, and working with them on their packaging related items, really, and making sure that they've got a really high value competitive item that enables them to focus their challenges in other areas, because they certainly don't want to be challenged around packaging. So that's how we really want to deal with our customers. And then bringing that into our vision, which is focusing on that customer experience component, and operational excellence in everything we do. We can then build a selection of critical success factors, which is the key pillars that are really going to make that our business tick. And that was all around operational excellence, customer experience, and we wanted to grow, but we wanted to grow profitably. From there, you can build a selection of KPIs, and that's all underpinned by a selection of values. And we think that if we're doing that really, really well, and we understand our customer base, this business is going to be in Australia for a long time, and we're able to help other Australian businesses over a long time. That brings plenty of opportunity to our staff, and it puts us in a really great place. I think when we looked at our customer set, their needs were very extensive. I use the analogy that because we've got so many customers, it's just like looking at a big bag full of jelly beans, all these mixed colors in between. And it's not until you start separating the colors and having a look at your base, you can start to segment who your customers are, what industries they're in, what they need from you, what they buy, what their challenges are, etc. And that enables you to position yourself really well depending on the group of customers you're looking at, whether it's from a marketing perspective, from a face-to-face sales perspective, whatever. Then we can, work that in with our why, our vision, and our mission. Now, I guess all around our business, we try to make it the vision, the mission, critical objectives, very visual. So for people who have been out to Signet, you'll know that if you walk around the organisation, there are plenty of boards around the place with all of this stuff up there. We've got our short-term goals chart, which is the image down on the bottom right-hand side, and that lists everything that we're going after for the financial year, but also as part of the 5-year plan. And there aren't too many secrets. We want the executive and the front line all sweating the same things, and like our CEO all the way through to the customer facing rungs, they're all sweating the same things. And if anyone's ever got a question, the executive and the management team is always very happy to elaborate. I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's very visual, and there's an interconnectivity of what we're doing from the top all the way down to the bottom, and it's all about the customer.
It's really powerful, and the simplicity of which it's put together just helps everyone focus and really align on where you're going, which is amazing. So guys, the next bit I want to talk about is you've got the plan, you know who your customer is, and you're really starting to hone in on there, and you've formed your vision, mission, purpose around that. The next aspect, and this comes out of Agile largely, or Scrum, is that everything's then about the customer. It's about delivering those great outcomes for customers. And really, if you think about that, the way that we think about teams and how we build our capability, or even the roles we put into teams, it should be based on the customer, not based on business silos and divisions. So there's a number of things, like in sport, you don't put a team of front row forwards on the field. You don't put a team of wingers on the field. You put a team that includes front row forwards, wingers, halves, you name it, because these different skills and capability are needed to win the game. And in business and sales, I think it's the same. Like if you are selling a really technical product, it may be that your team needs to include more than just salespeople. It may need to have that technical person as part of the team. And the more it can be actually in the team and bounded to the team, the greater performance you'll get out of that. One of the best examples of this is Special Forces, where they form their small teams with all the different skill set and capability in there. So we're going to look at Signet and what journey James and the team have done to be able to create this agility and pace and the right team, small teams at the front line to really be able to move fast for customers.
Thanks, Brad. I think it's fair to say that within the Signet business, we've been through probably 12 to 18 months of building, particularly around our face-to-face sales channels. So we deal with a variety of customers across a number of markets, and turning over quite a significant volume of dollars. And one of the things that we needed to look at was our strategy and our structure, but also our people. So we're very lucky in this business to have some very talented people, some great salespeople as well. And part of the process was to integrate those salespeople into a broader national sales team, because we had a couple of silos running. So we worked really hard with making sure that we had the best people in the best seats to not only meet their own personal goals and objectives, but to add a whole lot of value back into their business. So we wanted to set them up for success. And part of that was also going to the market to hire some really good quality regional sales managers and position them out in the States, whilst utilizing our sales management infrastructure in other areas, and make sure that people were in the best spot to do a really great job. So in all of our states throughout Australia, we've got regional sales managers, and then we've got teams of salespeople underneath them, and they're servicing our really large corporate accounts all the way down to our large SMEs and some sort of mid-level SMEs as well. And that took a little bit of time to get that right, but we're sort of coming to the back end of that now, where we're very comfortable and blessed to have a really great team. Part of that process meant that we had to sort of analyze where people's strengths were. And it also meant that we needed to break down the roles that they were doing to understand what were the skills that they needed to be really successful in those jobs. So Signet runs like a sales or a skills matrix, and there's an image of that just in the bottom of the slide deck there. And it kind of lists all the critical components of a role, and then some sort of value-added approaches as well. And at any particular point, we're able to work with our staff to understand, where the opportunities are and where the gaps lie, and then work with our trainers, because we've got national sales trainers as well, to get their skill level up. We also have technical people based around the country, and they're able to be pulled into particular projects that we're running and work alongside our salespeople to get the best outcome for the customer. And I think a critical component of that is also our graduate program. We have great grads that come into our business, and we like to develop and grow them. And part of that is developing a great funnel of sales graduates to join our sales force and work with our senior people to maybe become the next head of sales. Who knows?
Thanks, James. So you see, guys, a lot of the focus then is how do we build the right team and the right capability right at the front line. And it relates a lot to this next slide that I'll show, is that once you've got the plan at the top line and then you've got the team formed, it's about then helping the team to form their own plan, both as an individual and also a team. I think James Kerr made a good statement on one of the podcast episodes I recorded with him, which hasn't been released yet. It'll come out in the next few weeks. But he made a statement that the game's won or lost on the turf. And what he meant by it is that in business, often we focus so much on what happens up in the boardrooms and with our strategic planning, but we forget to get that down to the front line. And they have a concept that comes out of the All Blacks, which is called pass the ball. And pass the ball means pass the empowerment and the accountability right down to the players on the field. And you wouldn't see many sporting games where during the middle of the game, we have to stop play because someone has to go ask someone a question or get approval for something, or go and try check with a different team to figure out how to do something. Once the game's on, that team's empowered and they're playing hard. The thing that the All Blacks have done particularly well is they've deployed the strategic engagement and involvement to that team also, and that team is really leading their own way for a large part of each week. And I think in sales, it's the same, that the more that we can help sales teams form up their own plan as a team, but then also down to the individual, and really execute on that and get moving forward. And we've got them skilled and capable with the data and the knowledge and the information they need to be able to just move fast, make decisions, adjust, and play that game, versus having to stop, start, the better outcomes we're going to get. And I think also the less the frustration. I think I just saw a Q&A question come through from someone, thank you very much, about does this apply to services as much as it does to physical product sales? And I'd say that it does, because we're talking about a system that is about how to help people perform really well, and also a system to create an amazing culture and amazing level of focus. That applies as much to a team selling a physical product as it does to a team selling a service, or any team really. And I guess Agile Sales has been applied to many service companies, and it's the same concept, applied exactly the same way. James, do you have anything to add just on that, applying to a service versus applying to a product sales team?
I don't think so. I think, as long as you understand your product or your service, it's really about getting the right people around there to sell that. And if you've got a really solid framework of people about you that are passionate about whatever it is that they're dealing with, whether it's tangible or intangible, I think that puts you in a great spot for future.
So let's look at some of the systems here, guys, that Signet used to actually deploy strategy and help the team form their own plan, and then start to really be able to measure that and track it and execute on that. Oops. There we go, JP.
Okay, so I think this is pretty relevant in a COVID environment as well. Like, we've just had Melbourne, it looks like they've gone into another 6 or 7 day lockdown, unfortunately. But one of the things that we did, particularly over the last 12 to 18 months, is pull together really solid plans. Now, I spoke earlier about strat plans and a vision and a mission and all that sort of stuff, but one of the things you got to build into your planning framework and your strategy framework is agility and a bit of flexibility, because who knows what's going to happen around the corner. And you want to still have your goals and objectives in place, but be able to adjust them on the fly if need be, in the instance that a pandemic kicks off. So one of the things that we did with our sales team when the COVID environment kicked off in that month of March is sat down and said, okay, well, most of you guys are dealing with your customers on site, face to face, and that's where they were really effective. And all of a sudden, overnight, they weren't able to do that. So we had to pull together really solid plans to ensure that we were able to still offer something interpersonal with our customers and help them, but in a remote environment. So we had to break down our customer segments. We had to look at where our success was, and we had to look at the industries that we felt were going to be, best positioned to ride out the storm, and how we were going to position ourselves to help out those industries. So we pulled together our national sales team with all of the management, and we sat down as a group and we looked at all of the challenges, and we tried to create solutions for those, and we wrote them down. And Brad assisted us in guiding us through that, and by getting that team together, we were then able to align whatever it was that we were putting down on paper back to our vision and our purpose. But it also enabled the team to feel accountable to the suggestions that they're putting forward. And with accountability, the success comes because they all feel like they're working towards a common goal. And as a result, we were able to integrate really well into a remote selling environment with utilization of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and over the phone stuff, and get through quite a difficult period very profitably, which was great. Part of having the plan in place is having measures in place to see how you're going with that plan. And we're really lucky in this business that we've got an incredible tech stack, and we have invested very heavily in a product called Power BI, which if anyone's used Power BI, you'll know how amazing it is. And that enables us to create any sort of visual measure or reporting function connected into our back-end databases and data warehouses to get a really intimate understanding of our business. But what we did is we created visual boards, almost like huddle boards. There's an example of that just down in the bottom right-hand corner. And that looks at all of our critical leading measures. So we said, if we're going to be successful, what does that look like? And what are the key leading measures that we need to sweat every single day to achieve our overall goals? And in a sales environment, it's pretty easy sort of stuff. It's leads coming in. It's how often you're dealing with your customer. It's how often you're looking for problems in their business and working with them on solutions. Then you build an opportunity pipeline and a conversion pipeline, and then the sales and the profitability results can come in, and then you loop it back around to dealing very heavily with your customer. So we're able to get real-time data at any particular point to see how we're going to those critical leading measures. The lagging measures, they are what they are at the end of the day, but we can impact right now, right today, our leading measures to see how we're going to end up.
I think JP, thanks for that, mate. And someone's just asked a question that's really relevant to what you're just talking about. The biggest roadblocks in shifting a tenured team. Like, I'll just add first, JP, on this. Like, I think a lot of it comes back to what James just said, that empowerment precedes accountability. So if you look at it, I think if you run this sort of process and you empower people to help form a plan that's aligned to the top line plan, they are then accountable to that. And if you look at the word accountable, it then tells you what's also important. Accountable is able. So if they're able to then really be empowered to help set the measures and set the strategic focus areas and also some of the core projects and actions they're going to do, and then that's accountable, and there's a good purpose behind it. Like, I think the one thing that's great with Signet is helping Australia compete resonates strongly with all the employees, and also there's a lot of passion for it. And there's also an environmental tinge to it too, which, if we don't help the environment going forward, we don't believe we're going to be competing either. That motivation driver that is really relevant to people, plus the system we're talking about now, it helps you shift even your people who might be within the company for a long time and don't want to shift, because in a way they have to shift. And in the worst cases, if they don't shift, they're not right for the bus, and they'll shift off your bus and onto someone else's. So I think, and ultimately that's the worst case scenario, but typically we find that rapidly people jump on the bus, and if anyone doesn't want to, they get off quite quickly. James, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think if you can work with your staff to really understand how they can contribute to the goals and get their input, it's very evident the people that are very well bought in and the people that are not. But we didn't experience that in our sales team. We've got a great bunch of people who all genuinely wanted to get through a fairly difficult time on top while still offering a really high value service and product to their customers. So the work that we did up front and being inclusive, because we've got experienced guys and girls out there that have a lot of insight in the customers and in their markets, and it would be silly not to take advantage of that and take their input and put it down to grow us.
It worked well for you, didn't it, James? But you guys have had a long journey on that. I have had other companies, guys, where I've worked with where some people have opted out. They can't make the journey. They can't, and they do opt out typically. Another question just came through that's really cool, which is how much do you think this is relevant on tech adoption moving ahead? And I think it's paramount, guys, because often in sales in particular, we see the technology as being like the silver bullet. So we go, wow, there's this new technology, let's apply it to this process and then get our people to use it. But the problem is that typically doesn't work because people feel like technology is being shoved down their throat and they don't buy into it. They see it as big brother or a pain in the neck. Whereas if you flip it the other way with what James and I are talking about, where you engage the people strategically and you get them to think about what do we need to do differently? How do we need to move forward? And you get your people thinking about how do we improve those processes? And then they go, hey, this new technology might help us. Or you, even as a leader, you could then go to them and go, hey guys, I've just seen this new tech come through. What do you think? Is there a way that this could help us move forward and actually achieve those results we're chasing? And you can get great outcomes with that. You get adoption because they're involved in it. So I've seen CRMs roll out where they've been shoved down the throat of people and it's failed or taken years to adopt. I've seen CRMs roll out off of this people process technology approach and they get adopted straight away with massive uptake. James, anything else you'd add, mate, on that?
Yeah, like I think specifically from a tech perspective, you know, the environment that we've been in has enabled most businesses to move forward, you know, 2, 3, 4 years in the space of a really, you know, short period of time. So, you know, like we're able to do these sorts of things. And I certainly know throughout our business now, we're just interacting like this all the time. And, you know, whether it's meetings or whatever, that's been a really great thing. But also, like Brad mentioned, CRMs, like historically, if you roll out a new CRM or tech stack in your business, there's a really long adoption period because you've got people who are very, very willing to adopt and other people who are sort of, takes a little bit of time to get them on board. But I think certainly in the COVID environment, people have adopted technology very quickly, very readily, because they know that it's going to benefit them and their customer at the end of the day. So that has been really interesting for me to watch, and it's been a really great thing.
Yeah, it all comes back down to motivation, really. Like if you involve people and get them cued into it and they're part of it, normally there's a greater emotion there. If you've got a COVID crisis, there's emotion. Like without emotion, people don't change, they fight it. I think there's a technique too called customer journey mapping that James and I aren't going to talk about today, but customer journey mapping is a great technique to take teams through, and really they become part of the improvement for customers. It's like this customer-centric process improvement approach, and it's a really great way to be able to look for improvement for great outcomes for customers, but also look at technologies and other processes as you're doing it. Let's go on to the next bit. So we're talking about, we've got the plan down to the team and we've worked with people to help them form their plan and their approach. And we've done everything we can so that they can then just play the game. They're not having to stop, start, and go looking for things or information. The next part that's important is creating the visual scoreboard. So in sport, if you went to any sporting match and there was no visual scoreboard, you'd probably be pretty bored. You know, ultimately, it drives a level of energy when you're at sport watching it. You know, you're looking at your own score against others and you're thinking, right, are we going to win, where we're at? And you hope for your team to do the best they can. I'm sure the players on the field are looking at it too. I know when I played cricket or rugby league, I was often looking at the scoreboard thinking, okay, what do we got to do? And I was adapting based on that. And the same goes for a sales team. If a sales team has a visual scoreboard that's as live as possible and they gather around it and talk to it regularly, which we'll talk about in a moment, I think you've got greater chance that people are going to be adapting and pivoting and making movement towards that challenging goal in line with the plan, but based on what the scoreboard's telling them. And so the scoreboard's extremely important. It's just really important to get it right, but because the wrong measures will drive the wrong behaviors. So there's one part which is having the visual scoreboard. The other is making sure you got the right leading and lagging measures that are going to actually drive outcomes for your team and your customers and your strategic plan. So I'll hand over to James to just talk about Signet's experience a little bit when it comes to a visual scoreboard.
Thanks, mate. So I think from a sales perspective, having something visual is just super important. We do very regular huddles or scrums with our teams. So being a national team, we do some stuff at a national level, and then we do other things at a state-based level with the local teams. But You know, if I look at it from a national level, we do a meeting on a Wednesday morning, goes for 15 minutes. It's got every single salesperson in the country, including a lot of the graduates, and we go through our visual scoreboard and our leading and lagging measures. We start off every meeting looking at that, and then that leads in discussion about people and opportunities and stuff going on around the business and that sort of stuff. But first thing we're looking at is how are we tracking overall with our leading measures. And we use Power BI to do that. We can share it via Microsoft Teams when we're all catching up. And that's just been a super important thing for us to do, because straight away it's visual. We can see things that are good and opportunities for development, and we can dig straight into those exceptions and really quickly create a plan to improve those. As you move around our business, most people will see a number of visual boards set up and people huddling around boards. An example of that's in this image down the bottom here. This is an internal sales team that we have. They're predominantly graduates, and they've created this board themselves. So they brought in some sort of macro components of the business, and then they've customized it to have the things that are most relevant to them throughout their day. And those guys, they drive that meeting. I think that a really good thing to think about from a sales environment also is a Kanban approach. So a great example of a Kanban working is our opportunity pipeline. So anyone who knows the sales world knows that you have a group of projects that you're working on as a opportunity pipeline, and there's certain phases that you move through. So in our CRM that we run, that's then linked into Power BI, we can quickly see where are our bottlenecks in our opportunity pipeline and the delivery that we're giving to our customers, so we can quickly just jump in on that. It's it's a red light, and we can say, okay, well, we've got a query here that we've got to get sorted out. How can we create more flow in the process? And having something visual has been critical to that.
Thanks, James. So everyone too, there's a good little test you can do. If you already have a visual scoreboard in your team, ask yourself the 1, 3, 10 question when you look at it, okay? Look at it and go, within 1 second, can you see where the team's winning or losing? Can you see traffic light, red, green, where we got challenges, both on lead and lag measures? Within 3 seconds, can you see what's causing it? Can you see what the team feels the root cause is, or the causal factor of that red? And then within 10 seconds, can you see the actions they're taking to fix it and get back on track? And so you'll see in this board here, 1, 3, 10 plays out, where they're using red or green for their indicators, and there's trend line charts, and you can see the causals there. And then within 10 seconds, you can easily look over and see where the actions are that they're taking in that Kanban you see on the board. An attendee's just asked, do you do this in hybrid or remote settings? I think I'll just add on that, I think it's both. You can do it. So you can do a hybrid, but it comes down to how many people are remote versus on site together. So with a hybrid setting, I think it's important that no more than 1 or 2 are in the other format. So if you've got people in the office and 2 people in remote using video camera or a laptop, I think that's fine, because as the facilitator of the meeting, or the scrum master, as it's called, you can include them. As soon as you get up to 5 people remote, 5 people in the office, it gets complex because it's too hard to facilitate. So I'd say it comes down to your blend of who's remote, who's not. James, do you have anything else to add on that, mate? Blended model, hybrid model versus all remote versus all in the office?
Yeah, I think what we tried to do is make sure that everyone's in the same medium at a particular point. So if we're doing a national huddle, knowing that we've got national teams dialing in, it'll always be via Microsoft Teams or over like Zoom if that's what you use. And that means that everyone's in the bubble together. It's difficult when you've got most people in the bubble and one on the outside. So we encourage everyone to dial in. But if it's just a local state-based team and everyone's on site, sure, go and huddle around a board. But I wouldn't have 5 people huddling around a board and someone trying to dial in with a camera. I think typically you try to have everyone doing one thing or the other. But occasionally there are instances where you don't.
Yeah, and nowadays with technology, you can create the same outcome virtually as you can using a physical board. So guys, let's look at the next bit which relates to this, which is Scrum. So Scrum is a very powerful meeting pattern and planning pattern. combined with this sprint concept to enable a team to move forward. Now, two Harvard professors, Hirotoka Takuchi and Anaka, defined Scrum as a word for when they studied the highest performing organizations with innovation back in the 80s. And they said it was like they were a rugby team. You know, they'd see the people in the team scrum together for a few minutes or maul. It's really the maul, they should have called it, and split. And then they saw them move forward with the work they were doing, then come back in a maul again, split, sprint forward, come back in a maul, split, sprint. So it was this sequence of rapid come together as a team, split, move forward towards the goal. And if you think about that in sales, it's beautiful. Like if we can get it that our teams are scrumming together around, you know, rapid meeting around a scoreboard with their challenging goals and lead measures, and they're learning and adapting and planning based on that, and they're splitting and then they're sprinting forward with improvement, and then they're coming back together at least weekly, it's a very powerful system if you can get it going. The trick, but I see, is that you want to get that sprint off the back of the meeting. You know, if you don't have that pace happening, well, there's something going wrong, and there's a lot of techniques to it. But just let's look at Signet in this whole Scrum and sprint type concept.
So, and all teams do this a little bit differently, but I'll just focus this from a sales perspective. So I mentioned that we've got multiple teams spread out around the country, but we break it down into, I guess, into tiers. So we have our management team, and we huddle typically once a week in a more formal environment. And that's off the back end of a national sales huddle where we have all of the salespeople involved. So we catch up once a week. It's a 15, 20-minute meeting. It's not the same person every time that runs it. There's been full ownership passed on to the teams to create what we're talking about, and therefore we structure each person leading it differently. So it could be a graduate one day, it could be a sales manager another day, and it just siphons through that way. So ultimately it means that if one of the managers or I can't be there, we know the meeting's still happening in the background because it's just siphoning through. Everyone knows what they've got to talk about, and there's full ownership and commitment over there. Off the back end of that, the sales management team, we catch up, and then we can talk about exceptions that we've seen and what we need to do and work on throughout the business. But we have regular structured times that are locked out to do these meetings. Then at a state-based level, the regional teams, they'll have their own structure where they might catch up once a week, or they might catch up for 5 minutes every morning to just go over what they're doing for the day and what they learned from the previous day or any challenges that came up. I think a critical component of when you're catching up is, you're going to sweat your leading measures and you're going to cover that off really quickly. But you're going to want to have a bit of a like a plan, do, check, act function in your board as well. So if there are any queries that come up, you can put an action against them, and then by the next time you've caught up, you've got you're following up on those actions to progress them through, and you can park certain things, or you might progress certain things as well. So that's probably the most significant thing, but I really would like to harp on, make sure that you have got ownership out into your teams to be able to feel that they can run these and add to them themselves. It's their board, it's their visual measure, it's their huddle. They need to get the value out of it, and then everything else comes.
Yeah, James, it's so important. When I see teams get educated in this and then supported in developing their own boards, it works. As soon as a standard gets shoved down people's throats again and they get told this is what you got to do and exactly how you got to do it, it doesn't work the same. People need to own the scoreboard, develop it, make it look the way they want within structures, and you can then coach and help them to get better and better. There's a question that's come through, which is, does the whole business need to work in this way? And the short answer is no. In that James is describing Scrum at scale. So that's where you have a frontline Scrum, middle management Scrum, executive Scrum, and issues and challenges can go to the right level rapidly to be dealt with. It's like this agile organization, like the whole organization's able to pivot and move daily or weekly based on things that are coming through. But it doesn't have to be the whole organization. You can actually create a beachhead within a division, which I think, James, back in the early days, you really did within your division in sales, even before the whole of the Winston Group went to, multi-tiered huddles and Scrum at scale.
I think also, you've got the function of catch ball happening as well. So by scrumming and huddling regularly, and if you do have multiple tiers of huddles happening throughout the business, if anything does come up at an executive level or whatever, and you know that you can pass those critical bits of information down the chain rapidly, and then have information flow back up the chain rapidly as well. And that's a critical component in the rhythm of huddles.
Yeah, I got to admit, guys, for anyone listening, like I get a lot of really great authors on my podcast, the best of the best on enterprise excellence and operational excellence, and you name it. Two things they all talk to. One is strategy and cultural deployment. How do you deploy strategy and cultural down to every level? The other thing they all raise is how do you get an agile organization? How do you get this speed of comms and visual data analysis happening at all levels so info can flow up and down rapidly every day? That's the two most common topics that come up. I think it's the two things where you got a system for a business that can shift the whole culture, both breaking down silos between divisions, but also going up the chain, which is often called permafrost or mud, where traditionally things get lost from frontline to executive. Let's go on to the next bit. So you've got your top line plan as an organization. You formed the right teams based on the plan and what your customers need. You've been able to help those teams form their own plans and get real buy-in, help them form a visual scoreboard. You've helped them get this rapid rhythm of scrum and sprints going, and you've got it maybe tiered. You've got the flow so you can have info flow up and down the company and across it really fast. The next part that's important is really leadership. And to me, the most important part, just like in a sporting team, is the ability of that leader to coach and grow every individual to help drive performance and help drive and develop team culture to get performance. Like we've all worked in a poor individualistic culture where no one gets on and you feel not part of the team. Most of us hopefully have had the chance to work in a team where we feel part of the unit and we see each other as a peer and a mate and someone we're willing to work and go bloody hard for. It's a different outcome, what you get. Like I've had a young sales team that I worked with 20 years ago where they were selling technology. They were 21 years old. They weren't technical specialists, but they were involved in coming up with their own plan and their own strategy. And they were a tight-knit unit where they were coached and supported to achieve things for themselves, but also the team. And I think, JP, you were involved in that. Like, I think the conversion rates we're getting were like 80, 85, 90% conversion rate on opportunities. And then I've also,
back in the good old days, yeah.
Back in the good old days. And then I've also worked in teams where there are a bunch of individuals and they're all chasing after their own measures and their own goals and they don't really care about anyone else. And you get performance rates of conversion rates of 25, 30%, 35%. Like, it's crazy. How can a bunch of experts who are engineering technically brilliant, still driven people only get conversion rates of 35, 40%, where a bunch of 21-year-olds who are motivated and driven and coached and led can get 85 to 95% conversion rate? It's a pretty crazy outcome. I think this plays a big part of it. So let's go into it. I'll just hand over to you on this, James, but really to me, it's that leader as coach bit.
Yeah. So I think one of the critical things that we're doing at the moment, so I mentioned that we've got a really talented team of people and we've got a really talented team of managers looking after them. And one of the things that we can do as a business is just support the continued coaching opportunities for our managers. So what we want them to be really good at is developing and supporting their staff. And we do that through having a solid coaching model. So, like you can use any model really, but, the GROW model has certainly got a lot of legs on it, which is, the goal, the reality, options, and a way forward. And Brad might have a chat about that in a minute, but we're doing a number of sessions with our managers, sort of going forward over the next period of time and specifically coaching for performance. And that, increases their skill set, but also looks at their teams and makes sure that all the teams have all the information and the skills needed to do their job really well and feel satisfied in their roles and offer our customers something that's of really high value. Part of that is, having the managers able to spend time individually with our salespeople, when they're visiting their customers or out on the road, and it's often those times when you are, in a car or, out on the floor with your people is when the relationship is truly developed and you can see, what they're really great at and areas that they need some development in, and the things that they're struggling with, and how the customer perceives you as well, and then you can make adjustments on the fly and continue the coaching process.
Thanks, JP. I think it's a good time. Someone's just mentioned on the chat, thanks, hunger. And yeah, that young team, they had hunger. Like they would work stupid hours and then go party and fish together or do everything together. They were just tight. But I'd say that part of that hunger came from, I'd say the grow model style approach. Okay. So this team had cascaded the company's purpose down to their own, which was to basically kill the competition. They had like a sniper scope up on the wall with an image of the competition in the middle of it, which was quite funny. But it was also who dares wins. They were all pretty rah-rah, and it was about taking some risks and really going the extra yard. But everyone believed in it. It wasn't like it was some jargon thing that the boss had come up with. It was something that the team believed in. So there was that hunger because the purpose was aligned. But also, I think the other thing is that we basically used the grow model with every team member, where we knew each team member's personal goal as well as their business goals. And we helped them achieve their personal goals at the same time as achieving the business goals. And we kept the two correlated. And the other thing I'd say is no individual in that team had their own, they weren't paid money based on their own individual budget. They were paid money based on what the team achieved. And I think there was something in that reward system. And, there was individual KPIs or lead measures. So each person knew how many of the leading measures they'd done and how they were tracking there. But ultimately where they got rewarded or recognized was based on team performance. And I think that drove an outcome. JP, you got anything to add on that, mate?
No, I think definitely that team approach, and I think also having a really good group of young people starting off their career with a solid management person around them. It's a great environment, because they're all trying to set themselves up and they're all ready to learn. And if you've got a great culture, they don't know any different. They're just learning this great culture that you're instilling in them. And that's a pretty exciting time and a great thing for businesses to focus on, I think, as young people, because they're the future of your organization. And if you can catch them early and keep them and develop them, I'd say that you'd build a pretty successful organization over a period of time.
Yeah. And I'd say too, guys, if you really practice and improve some of the systems that James and I are talking about today, it doesn't matter what age the employee is, they'll build greater motivation, greater ownership, and greater drive forward. So it's something to really focus on. The other one I've got is it harder now to do this remotely? I think I'd say it isn't, but you still need to bring people together at times. I think remote, there's a way to do some really cool team building work and all this visuality and strategy deployment and all this stuff James and I are talking about so well and so effectively. But I do think you need to find a way to still bring people together, at least, I don't know, if you could do it every month, do it every month. End of month catch up and review. In Agile, it's called a review and retrospective. It's a really cool technique. Quarterly, 6 monthly. If you can only do yearly, bring everyone together yearly. But I think you need to try blend both if you can. But you can still do so much now with remote work and the technology that's there. James, anything to add, mate, now with the remote side of things?
No, I think the technology that we have now has made it far easier. I mean, if we went back, before everyone was able to work in a remote environment, if you had national teams, I mean, you try to get interstate regularly, but often a lot of your interaction with them anyway was over the phone or over a mobile. Whereas now we can have that interaction with someone really easily with a camera, and you can see them and they're all set up and ready to go. And there's been a huge number of benefits that organizations have picked up. You can imagine trying to roll out this technology 3 years ago. It would have taken a really long time, but now people are able to feel connected in a virtual sense. I mean, of course, people love to be face to face and that sort of thing, and you'd encourage that as best you could. But if you're running national teams, now we've got this great thing called Zoom or Teams, and you can have a really valuable interaction with your staff very frequently, and you don't miss too much.
No. I had one other team, guys, that I worked with where they focused a lot on empathy and vulnerability as a team. and they'd share different insights and backgrounds and elements about each other at a regular, it was more of a cultural meeting that they did. I think it was once a week they did this one, or once a fortnight. And boy, just the bond it formed where people got to know each other more deeply and shared support to each other and empathy. And yeah, even though it was remote, I'd say it was more powerful than when people come together and they don't do those things. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So guys, that's the end of our presentation. It really is, if there's any other questions that want to be put through, please do. There's additional resources you can get your hands on. So you can get your hands on the book through any bookstore, Amazon, you name it, you can buy the book. There's resources on the website, agilesales.net.au. There's strategic plan templates, there's visual measure templates, there's all lead measure templates. So you can go to there and go to resources, and you can register yourself there and get hold of those. And there's also the podcast. Now, the Enterprise Excellence podcast covers many topics, but there's a lot on there in sales too. So feel free to go and have a listen.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you again to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and of course for Brad and James giving up their time to present for us. As mentioned, we will be posting a recording and summary of this session on our website in the coming days. We'll also have links, obviously, to Brad's collected works, the book, the podcast, his website, which I highly encourage anyone, if you haven't already, to check out. From there, we'll also make sure we're sending through links with some updates off the back of this session. But again, thank you everyone for attending this afternoon, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks, James, and thanks, Dan, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks.